Coming up next on The Health Hustle.
I'm at the point now where I just don't see why I would. I was actually thinking about this morning. There's two ways to think about your relationship with alcohol. I think one of the things that's really important is that people are educated about what alcohol actually does in their body. And so now that I'm very educated on it because I'm fascinated by it and I love to know what's happening in my body, it's like I know too much. So like for me to sit there and try to enjoy one glass of wine, like I would just be thinking about all the statistics that the research shows. Like I wouldn't be able to actually sit there and enjoy it. And I know my relationship with alcohol is addictive. And if I just had one, then I would be, well, why don't I just have two? And then I don't want to play that game. It's not a good use of my mental energy. And I don't want to play that game with myself. So I think it's different for different people, but I think a lot of people don't have the education about what it's doing in their bodies. So that's the first part. And then thinking about it like a relationship. And it's just like any other relationship you have in life. It can be toxic, it can be healthy, it can be in balance, it can fluctuate through different stages. But having the level of self-awareness and to be like honest with yourself instead of just like bullshitting yourself the whole way, like thinking it's okay.
Hey folks, and welcome to the Health Hustle of Austin, Texas. On this show, we uncover the big ideas from your fellow health and fitness entrepreneurs in the Austin, Texas area about how they built their business and the lessons they learned along the way.
Hey y'all, Corey here, and on this episode, I had a chance to sit down with my good friend, Lora Harris. Lora is literally actually one of my very first true friends when I arrived here in Austin, Texas by having the lady cojones to slide into my DMs and say, what's up? And we've been connected ever since. She's actually been one of the people that's watched my motorcycle when I was out of the state. She supported me in growing my Austin entrepreneurs community, joined me for many life-changing dinners, and has been an incredible soundboard for when I'm struggling with my own mental health. Lora Harris has been sober for 4+ years. She is the co-founder of Sober Rebels and Rebel Mental Wellness, productivity coach for content creators and social sellers. She helps people build online businesses without having to be on their phone 24/7. She is a published author and currently working on her second book, and she has an internet famous dog. Check her out. She's awesome, and she considers herself a minimalist and is obsessed with health and wellness. Some of the things that we get into on this episode are the confidence that skills give you in everyday life, how to build your community, how to build a personal brand, knowing when to let go, how to grow a 50,000+ person following on Facebook, social media strategy, the moment she decided to go sober, how she was able to humble herself, having compassion for people and animals, the value in failing forward, and so much more. One last thing, if you're a health or fitness professional and you're having difficulties getting leads, I have a free 7-step process that walks you through how to convert your social media following into paying clients. You can find the link in the description of this episode. Without further ado, let's go. Lora Harris, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited. We've known each other from the beginning of our days in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Randomly got connected through Facebook.
Yeah.
And now,
I slid into your DMs.
Literally.
Yeah.
And now over a year later, here we are sitting on a podcast show. Did you ever think we would be here?
No, not at all.
It's wild.
We're exactly where we're supposed to be, though.
Yeah.
Always.
And the sad news for everybody just to know is that I believe you're leaving Austin at some point.
I'm taking a break. We're on a break. So I'm going to do some traveling this summer. And then I might be back.
So Austin's going to be like an extra boyfriend for a little bit?
Yes. Little side piece.
Let's get into it. So before we started recording, we brought up the fact that your parents are actually entrepreneurs, and that might have been the starting place of you even starting to see entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience as a kid?
Yeah. So some of my earliest memories are them working in restaurants and food trucks. And what I saw from that was them just working really long hours, odd hours. The kids had to come with them a lot. And so eventually that just wasn't in alignment with what they wanted. And so my mom went into teaching. My dad went into sales, which was an easy transition for them and got them more into the corporate world, if you will. And that's what they pretty much did the rest of their lives. And while it made sense for the family structure, that came with its challenges as well. So I kind of got to see both sides of it and a little bit of each. But yeah, that's how I got into restaurants initially, was just kind of having the passion for what they did. And cooking was really important in the home. And so that was my first like career chapter before I got into entrepreneurship.
What do you feel like you learned from that experience? And did your parents ever talk about in regards to like anything that did they have any regrets about it, about like leaving entrepreneurship and getting in the corporate world? Or did they ever talk about that ever?
Yeah, I don't think they had any regrets. I think the biggest thing I picked up on growing up was once they got into the corporate world, it was a better schedule for them. However, it came with the stress of like lack of job stability. And so they jumped around from company to company. There was one period that I like specifically remember when my dad was terminated from his like really successful job, and it was out of the blue, and it was just like this big like traumatic event for our family. So that sticks with me too. And then of course I've had my own personal experiences with that. And it's like, okay, like I know this is just a part of the deal. And I saw that growing up, and I've seen it as myself too.
I feel like that goes against the common discussion too about like having job security, quote unquote, when you're working, versus you're explaining it's actually the reverse of, it's actually, you don't have job security if you're not working for yourself.
You don't. And you would think we've learned that by now, through COVID and through recessions and things like that. It's like you think your job is secure, but nobody's is.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot lately about just the aspect of skills.
Yeah.
And how I feel like that's the ultimate currency.
Yes.
And like nothing about school I felt like ever taught me that, whether it was high school or graduate school, college, any of it, none of it really I felt like taught me the value of skills. I feel like what it taught me is just like how to fill a role and have a degree that could get me a job, not actually to have the skills that regardless of the circumstances that I could actually add value to the world.
100%. Because no one can take that from you. And I've worked with a coach that, one of the things she said, and this is great to think about, you have to build yourself up so that you have the confidence that if every stream of income you had right now died for whatever reason, that you could be dropped in the middle of a city where you didn't know a single person, and you could rebuild a business, a network, and a 6-figure income. And when you have that kind of confidence in yourself, it doesn't really matter what else is going on, because you've built that skill set to be able to do that over and over again if need be.
Do you feel like you have that now?
I do now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you feel like were maybe the pillars to that, or what can maybe somebody else take away from that, of like, what are those things that are important that could allow you to step into any city and be successful in some form?
The key to building a network is having the courage to put yourself in rooms that make you uncomfortable. And so I moved to Austin a year and a half ago and didn't know a single person. And, it's hard going to networking events when you don't know anybody. And I'm sober, so just throw that on there. I don't have the extra layer of liquid courage. But putting yourself in situations and around people that make you uncomfortable at first, and just getting used to that feeling. And I had a period about 6 months ago as well where I was kind of feeling like stale, and I was seeing the same people and hearing the same rhetoric, and making sure you don't get in like that echo chamber as well when you're networking, because that's really easy to do. And so again, I was like, well, what other rooms can I get in? What other professions can I get around? What level of people can I talk to? And I started putting myself in those uncomfortable situations. So it's really about like having enough confidence in yourself to walk into a room, know that you have value to bring, and making yourself make the connections.
Was this in Raleigh when you started stepping into these rooms?
So I've done that in Raleigh and in Austin.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason I ask that is because I'd be curious as to what maybe some of your earlier experiences were like that. And I bring that up because even back home from Minnesota, where I'm from, is that the few times that I feel like I did go to networking events, whether it was like a random meetup or whatever it was, it put like just a very gross taste in my mouth. And I didn't feel like I got any value out of it. I didn't feel like I actually made connections. Honestly, there was one of them specifically I remember very blatantly that it was just a pitch.
Yeah.
It was basically a guy that built a meetup community on this certain topic that he knew people would join. And then you would get there and there was no networking. It was basically him just like pitching his business and brand.
Yeah.
And it felt very gross to me, and it put a very gross taste in my mouth. Versus like Austin, I feel the polar opposite.
Right.
I feel like there's always a huge value add here. So that's why I'm curious as to like, what are your earlier experiences with it based on, I think location plays a big factor in that. Or how would somebody even like filter of what would be a good thing to go to or not go to?
It does depend on location. So Raleigh is a little older crowd, not in a bad way, but it's just a different demographic. and, a lot of kind of like old school thinking, and everyone's handing out business cards. I refuse to get business cards.
Same.
Like almost 5 years doing just fine without
Same.
business cards.
Totally
I refuse. So, going into those environments where like, what do you mean you don't have a business card? Like, I'll never forget the first networking event I went to, and I was talking to some gentleman in his 60s, and he was like, oh, you're in real estate and you don't have a business card? What do you mean you don't have a business card? And I would like seriously wanted to die. I wanted to go in the bathroom and just cry because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Everybody's so mean. But that was like my first event. And you kind of develop a different like lens once you go to some. So I think that networking is an art. And I don't walk into a room and say, I'm just going to pass out business cards to everybody. That's so inefficient. And that's what most people go in to do. So I go in and I say, well, here's my goal for this event. I want to make 3 connections that I follow up with and set an appointment with within the next 2 weeks. Or, I really want to connect with the host or the venue. Like, what is your goal for that event? And it doesn't have to be like, I'm just going to word vomit all over everyone what I'm doing. It's really about building your network instead of pitching your business and making a sale.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
1000%. Even the group that I run, I don't know if you've ever actually read the description, but it very blankly says like, do not come here to pitch your business card.
Yeah.
We're like a community of givers. We're not a community of like, here's my pitch. I'll probably never talk to you unless you buy from me again. Because it's just gross, right? Like nobody wants to feel that, which I hope a lot of people get that message from the community that, but also from you as well as somebody that's honestly like an incredible community builder. I've obviously taken a ton of advice and a ton of tips from you in terms of building community. What about the people that are in that position of not just wanting to attend communities, but wanting to build a community? What are some of the lessons or stepping stones to doing something like that?
I think the biggest thing there is just being authentic with it. Just showing up as yourself. This whole idea of like fake it till you make it, I don't believe in that at all. I think you should let people see behind the scenes and what's going on. So if it's your first event or your first community, like just say that. Like, hey, I'm just holding space. Like, I'm passionate about dogs, so all the dog moms are going to meet at Zilker at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. We're just going to hang out and see what happens. And then be open to learning and be open to feedback. So that's the other part of it is just because you have one event doesn't mean that you have to continue to have them that way, but you have to hold the space, get the people there, get the feedback, and then allow it to evolve and not be so attached to a certain way of doing something.
I just met a guy at that event we were at last night who he's building basically a cold plunge business and networking. So now I'm invited to his like opening party for his cold plunge thing, right? Which is very cool, which I want to touch on that. I'll come back to that in a second. But the reason that I bring this up is because I think that the way that he was running it is exactly what you're talking about. Is I was like, what's the purpose? Like, what are the intentions? And he was purely just saying that it's just an opportunity to come, try the product, see what people think. And if he gets good feedback, then maybe he'll do another one and maybe not.
Yeah.
Right. But he was very honest about like what the intentions were behind it. And I also wanted to come back to the double tap on the fact of not just the authenticity of the community of like what we're here and what we're to do, but like also like, what are the value adds that maybe we could add to this community? And like, what are the things that we could provide to these people that would be useful, that would make them even want to come to a community if we're hosting one?
I think making the points of connection, not just at that event. So, depending on what platform you're using, there's some of that stuff that can be built in, but even just, sending out follow-up emails or connecting people after the fact or saying, hey, Ashley, you may not have met Sarah, but I wanted to connect y'all, and doing an introduction on Instagram. Like, I'm really big about doing introductions in DMs. I think I've done some for you. But like, you can continue the networking after the event. So you can continue to add value and connect people even after the event's over.
What do you feel like are the intangibles of networking? I was talking to 2 friends of mine the other day, Tim and Tan. They're here in Austin. Do you know them?
Mm-mm.
They're actually, arguably, shout out to them. They probably have one of the biggest just communities of networks of people that I've ever seen, because they've been doing it for 5+ years. So they just are been in the game for so long, and they just have so much consistency. They were telling me the other day they had one with like Gary Vee was there the other day.
Shut up.
Yeah. And so they're very connected, and they've reached the point where now people are coming to them, like other like B listers or whatever, to essentially like run parties and host parties for them. That's the point that they're at now.
Yeah.
And so I was talking about them about the same question of like, what are the intangibles, or what are the purpose of this, right? Is like, I think we all can genuinely agree network's important, community is important. You could potentially monetize communities if you wanted to, but I was more interested of like, what are the intangibles, right, that people don't maybe recognize are the important aspects of networking? Have you noticed any of those in your own life?
I would say the most important thing is follow up, honestly. And I used to have a system. I don't have as rigorous of a system anymore, but when I would go to an event, the next morning after, I would have my stack of business cards that I collected because that's what everyone else was doing, right? Mm-hmm. And I would go through every single one, and I would find them on all the social media channels. If I couldn't, I would send them an email, but I would go in and say hi and send them a voice message and say, it was so great to meet you last night. Hope you have a good rest of the week. If it was someone I wanted to make an appointment with, I would ask for the appointment. So taking those extra steps of continuing the relationship, most people don't do that. Mm-mm. How often do you go to an event and someone actually reaches out to you the next day and just like wishes you a good day or a good week and says what a pleasure it was to like share space with you? Never. People don't do that.
Yeah.
They don't do that.
That's actually, it's funny you say that. I think I've done that only because like I take photos at all of our events, right?
Yeah.
So then having like a photo of all these people, it reminds me of like, oh, I need to connect with this person and this person, and like add them and tag them. And like, I feel like the tagging aspect of people from all the events is way underrated as well.
Yes.
Because like the tagging only now gets you involved in their community and their network, and they're willing to share it. And then all of a sudden, like you have a lot more people that in their world that are now connected to you.
Yeah.
So I want to continue your journey a little bit. So what was your experience like then? Your parents did the entrepreneurship thing. They're in the restaurant business. You decided ultimately to get more into the corporate world. Mm-hmm. What are maybe the things that we can learn from your experience in the restaurant industry, in the corporate world, that we can also apply to maybe business and entrepreneurship?
Something that I probably didn't do very well was to know when my position or company was out of alignment and to be willing to let go of that, or building something on the back end, knowing that that was temporary and I would want to move on. So I didn't really do either of those things. I stayed in positions a little too long, and it got to the point where I was just frustrated and it was like I couldn't take it anymore. Instead of coming from a space of, well, I have this other thing and now I can kind of transition and I'm in a position of power making a decision to do that, instead of the other way where it's like I just can't do it anymore. Got to go.
Do you see that in your business now? Like, do you find yourself having to, I don't know, grow or adapt position to position or skill to skill, I guess, maybe in the work that you do now?
Yes.
Okay.
All the time.
Every day. How do you recognize when those things come up, and what do you do to take action essentially?
Yeah, I think prioritizing our time, especially, so I have multiple streams of income and a lot of content creation. And so the biggest thing that changes for me, even from day to day, is working with the different platforms and the algorithms and the features. It's literally every day there's something new. Being able to adapt to that really quickly. And if something isn't working anymore or it's outdated, like Facebook Reels just did a big shift in their algorithm, which sucks because I'm in their monetization program. But just recognizing it for what it is and saying, okay, well, if this is this, then like I'm going to take some of the time that I was allocating there and I'm going to shift it over here. And not taking it personally and not getting like hung up on it. Oh, it's not fair. And oh, this sucks. And it's all free marketing.
Right.
And it's free opportunity to connect with people. Like, I think we forget that at the end of the day. And Gary Vee talks about that a lot. It's like the internet is a great place. It's very frustrating. But like at the end of the day, just sitting in that gratitude and moving past the frustration points when they come up.
What was the shift that happened in Facebook that you feel like was challenging for the monetization stuff that you were doing?
They recently did an update a few weeks ago. They've been growing their monetization program over the past year and a half. And so every time they invite more people in, it kind of dips into the pool and they reallocate the pay structure.
Got it.
Yeah. So that just happened.
Yeah, because I literally just today, actually, I think I saw somebody posting about that. And I've noticed it even from this podcast show is I've started doing just more reels also. I was mostly just doing them on Instagram, but then I started doing them on Facebook as well, and just have noticed like really high numbers lately for whatever reason. Yep. And also, side note, the comments on Facebook reels,
people are wild.
Is a cesspool.
Wild.
People are angry.
Yeah.
Like there was one.
I've had death threats on my dog.
What is? I don't understand.
I don't know.
I thought YouTube was bad, and then I started because I never was reading the comments in the Facebook ones, and I just literally, this was maybe a couple days ago, I started looking at them, and they were hateful.
Yeah.
On the dumbest topics, like calling like me like narcissistic, and like selfish and like all these like hateful things. I was like, whoa. I didn't know Facebook was so extreme.
Yeah.
But because you're huge in the Facebook world, you have
Yeah.
some 50,000 followers or something like that?
Yeah, I am an old school Facebook girl.
Yeah.
I have 53,000 followers. Gained all of those pretty much in the past year, but just because of all of the work that I put in before that, and then really grew a big audience off the Facebook Reels program.
So knowing what you know from there now today of like growing a Facebook audience, one, was it worth it? And two, how could somebody replicate that?
Totally worth it. I do think that Facebook long term is very sustainable. I know it has its issues, and you know, people will go to Instagram and then come back, and then people will go to TikTok and come back, but Facebook has really good like long term longevity. And their goal for this year is to become more efficient. So like I'm up in their stuff every day. And so like seeing all the updates that they're making, like it's really promising for the features that are being added and the way they're doing the programs. Of course, I take a little hit monetization wise, but I'm okay with that. As a whole, they have a lot of new features that they're implementing that should be really exciting.
Do you think that they're going to get hit anytime soon by any other competitors in the market? Because I know a lot of people have talked about LinkedIn as well lately. Do you see any shifts happening, or do you think that Facebook will just kind of ride it out?
I think Facebook will ride it out. I think there's a few things in Facebook that the other platforms can't even compete, especially groups. Like there's no groups in Instagram. They're trying out the broadcast channels and all that, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
So when it comes to building an online community, Facebook really is the best place to do that. And even within those groups, they've added so many features where you can do trainings and you can have mentorships, and they have subscription services. Like you really can build out an entire business under the Facebook umbrella. Like all the nuts and bolts are there now. Yeah. And a lot of people just don't know it's there.
And you started building this personal brand, one might say, what? Just right when you started leaving the corporate world, or how long ago was that?
Yeah, about 5 years ago.
Okay. So that was step one of you getting out of corporate world, deciding to do your own thing. And that was the basis of it, was like learning how to build a personal brand.
Yeah,
so,
I had to.
And I know you also have like thoughts on the difference between a business brand and a personal brand, and then obviously your ability to build a personal brand. What were the lessons learned in that stage of life of like when you did start building that personal brand?
Yeah, so when I first became an entrepreneur, I was in real estate. So I became a real estate agent because that's where you make all the money, right? So I started in that space, and I was the epitome of fake it till you make it. I dressed the part. I said all the right things. Like I thought I had to become like this Barbie doll version of a realtor, which a lot of people fall into that trap. And the first year and a half in that business, I wasn't successful at all. And the turning point for me was when I decided that I just wanted to do it totally differently. I said, clearly this is not working. The area I was in had literally 13,000 realtors in that city at that time. And I'm like, how the heck is anybody going to pick me, especially because I'm new, if I'm just looking like everybody else? So I decided to just totally like stop pitching my business and shift over to building a personal brand.
What did pitching your business look like, just to give people context?
Yeah, everything had to be polished and super professional.
Okay.
Talking about real estate statistics. And, you know, I do think there's a time and a place to show your authority in a space and build credibility. Maybe that's more geared towards LinkedIn. But people on Facebook are going to scroll right past that. And Facebook, too, if you're really business oriented in your content, they're going to want you to pay to run ads. That's just how they work. So they're not going to even show that content to people. And I learned that the hard way too.
Is that part of how you grew your audience personally? Was there any paid ads involved in it? Was
No
it purely
paid ads.
Interesting? Okay.
All organic.
Cool. So that beginning phases of personal branding, and you started essentially just being more authentic on the platform. And was that the catalyst that helped you essentially start to build this and start to get that notoriety? And was that helpful for real estate? Was that something that led to more sales, I guess you could say?
Yeah, so there were a few things I did kind of simultaneously. I started just showing more of my life, my animals, my exercise routine, you know, whatever, just more behind the scenes of like who I was as a person. When I did do video, which I've been a long time believer in video, so I was fine with flipping on a camera and talking, which a lot of real estate agents were not. So I'm like, okay, this is something that can differentiate me. Let me just show up and speak. Like that alone is going to set me apart. And I started a Facebook page. I started a community page at the time that was highlighting local restaurants and business owners. And a lot of real estate agents do this style of marketing now, but nobody was doing it when I started it 4 years ago. And so that alone built like this whole community within the town that I was in. And I got clients from that, just from people that were watching the videos and got value from the content, but it wasn't tied to real estate at all.
What were you talking about essentially? So you were bringing together a community of restaurant owners was this Raleigh?
Raleigh.
Was so just because like that was an industry that you came from, so you were just providing the platform for them to come together. What were you talking about then? What was the conversation?
So I was highlighting their business, and then the group was open to the public. So someone could join the group that just moved there or just wanted better places for date night or whatever, and they could basically have this guide of where to go. And I did interviews with the owners, and I would just, and again, it's face to camera time. And I would just ask them about their business, what's their specialty, what do they have going on, and then I would run giveaways and do all kinds of stuff just to get people involved and get the algorithm boosted. But I grew a really successful page and I got clients from it.
How long did you stay in the real estate game?
I did real estate for about 3 years. The first year and a half, not so well. Second year and a half, very well. And then I moved to Austin and actually did get my license here. But after a 60-day sabbatical, decided that that was not something I wanted to pick up again and kind of transitioned into a different space.
Just straight up lost the passion for it, basically?
I found that it was recreating a lifestyle that I was trying to get away from when I worked in the restaurant industry.
What's that?
Nights, weekends, and always on call.
Got it. That makes sense.
I didn't want that for myself.
So, and then is that where becoming quote unquote a content creator became more interesting to you?
Yeah. And doing the consulting work has always been a passion of mine. Basically just taking what I've learned and then helping other people that are, maybe one step or two steps behind.
Yeah.
And so, last year I made a full-time income on content creation, and now I'm kind of leveling it up of what I'm able to teach people, what I learned from that,
This is crazy that we're having this conversation. It feels very full circle to me because I remember when we did first meet, when we both kind of first came to Austin, that was like the main kind of service that you were providing, was basically helping people with their social media aspect.
Yeah.
And you briefly touched on the fact before we started recording of like, it was more or less the hows of like how to create social media. And now you've kind of shifted to more of a strategy aspect.
Yeah.
What from both of those angles can we learn, or what was it about the hows and why did you decide to now do something different?
Part of it was just me leveling up and getting more skills and experience in the area. But what I learned from teaching people how to post, when to post, let's write out a schedule, like just the really basic building blocks, there were things that got in the way of people doing that. So the execution side of it never happened. And so that didn't sit well with me because I felt like what I was doing wasn't as valuable because it never like came to fruition, and they would get frustrated because they're like, I know what to do, I just can't do it. So just digging in there and finding that there's a lot of mindset blocks that people need to work through. They know they need to go live, or they know they need to get on camera, but that's a whole bag of shit to unpack, usually.
Totally.
And so digging into that side of it, and then just the efficiency side of it in general. Like some people will sit down to write a post and it takes them 2 or 3 hours. And I'm like, yeah, we can't do that. I think quality of life and mental health when it comes to content creation is really important. So that's something that I've learned through my own journey and implement into my consulting services now is like, let's talk about how much time you're spending on your phone, how much time it takes you to batch content, how are you redistributing your content so that you don't have to sit there and recreate it 5 different times on different platforms, putting systems in place that can make content more enjoyable again and allow you to produce more.
Yeah, I have a friend here in town who he has it's probably at like 100,000 subscribed newsletter at this point, and he's more in the writing game obviously from the newsletter. But he told me something that I carry with a lot now, as he talks about he spends 20% of his time writing his newsletter and 80% of his time on distribution.
Yep.
And when I say that, it usually shocks most people of like it's like the most common thing is like, how do you have time to create all this content? And it's like, I'm saying the same thing over and over again. I'm just redistributing it 100 different ways.
Yes.
It's literally what I'm doing.
Yeah. Redistribution and engagement.
Yeah.
And taking that, feedback loop like we were talking about earlier, it's the same thing with content creation. Like the more you can put out and people start talking to you back, like, what are you doing with that? And how are you taking that to generate more geared in content that people want to see and it's providing value? So that's part of the system too, is like, instead of just throwing a bunch of shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, which you'll go through phases of having to do that, you know, when the algorithms change or there's a new feature or whatever, like, it's okay to play with stuff, but play with it and then take the feedback and then get more efficient and kind of narrow it down of what's the best value to your community.
What do you feel like would be like the most applicable advice for anybody else? Like, let's say somebody's in that position of they know they need to create content. I totally agree. I think most people have mental blocks around it. I literally just wrote about this yesterday, is most people have an issue of FOPO, fear of people's opinions, which is why they don't actually create stuff. It's my fun play on FOMO.
Yeah.
But what if somebody knew they were in that position that they're like, yes, I know I need to create content, but I just have no idea how. Do you have like systems or structures or something like very blanket statement that somebody could hear and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. This is how I should be creating content.
So I like to, if we're starting at the beginning, I like to build pillars of a personal brand. And so, you know, my 5 pillars, like, they're very clear: sobriety, mental health, business and mindset, sexual empowerment, and I'm a dog mom. Those are my 5 pillars. So going through an exercise like that, as simple as it seems, like, what are the things that are really important to you and define you other than your job title? So there's nothing in there I said about work. These are just the things that I find myself talking about and I'm passionate about. And then you can go within 5 of those pillars and say, okay, well, within these, how can I provide value with something that's authentic to my brand? And value comes in different forms too. It has to be inspiring, educational, or entertaining. So how can I do one of those 3 things within my brand pillars? And so then you have this web, right, that you're building out of different kinds of content you can create that's within your personal brand, and it's bringing value. And if you can hit those 2 things at the same time, it's going to be good content. And then take the feedback, right?
How long did you feel like it took for you to start gaining traction for something like that? Once you did have clarity on the brands, like, if somebody did decide to start doing that, like, how long would they expect something to take before they started noticing feedback?
It's going to depend on the quantity of content you're putting out, but not very long.
Yeah.
Not very long. I have a business partner right now in the wellness business that we've been kind of mentoring her, and she's built her Instagram from 800 followers to 30,000 followers in less than 60 days.
Damn.
Because she's consistent, she's authentic as shit, but she's consistently showing up.
Which platform is this? Facebook?
Instagram.
That's
which is very hard to get organic reach now.
Literally just going to say that.
Yep.
Like, so that says a lot. And do you think at the crux of that is just like I'm sure it's as cliche as this fucking statement is, like, just authenticity of it, right? What was the topic that they were talking about that they seemed to resonate with people?
So she is a homestead mom. So she talks about clean ingredients, non-toxic life, her family. Obviously, we're in the mental wellness, gut health space. So, you know, what that change has done for her family's health. And she's also sober. So she talks about sobriety, and she talks about business. You know, she authentically shares, like, this is what this business has done for me and my family. And, you know, she is a perfect example of authenticity and what that can do for you, because she'll show up on camera and be telling a story and it brings her to tears and she just cries. You know what I mean? So, like, that's complete opposite of, like, fear of what other people think. She's like, no, this is who I am. Like, and if you don't appreciate it and, like, that doesn't resonate with you, like, it's okay. You're not my people. And we've had to work with her on some of that stuff too, because she started to get her internet trolls, especially on Facebook. And she's like, I don't really know how to handle this. And I'm like, I can walk you through this. Been there, done that. I can walk you through it mentally.
So what about your own experience with sobriety then? So, like, obviously that was a big catalyst for a lot of what you do now today. Can you maybe share that story of, like, how that showed up in your life and how it's been beneficial as to, like, what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I'm just over 4 years sober, and that has been kind of a parallel path I've been running with building this personal brand. And also, when I removed alcohol, that was a big part of my identity. So simultaneously, I was trying to figure out who the fuck I was without alcohol, and then how do I tell that to people? So it was a very difficult journey, but kind of beautiful looking back on it, that I had a lot of space to create who I was, because I left my job, I left the alcohol, I eventually left my relationship, and then I left the city I lived in. So sometimes we don't think we're creative, or we don't think we know who we are, because we're too busy being all of these things that we're not. And so like the stripping away process, and alcohol is just one example of it, it gave me this space to redefine who I was as a human and what was important to me.
How do you think that alcohol became such a pillar of your identity? Like, why did that become the thing that was so important to you?
In the restaurant industry, it's a culture thing. And I say that, but when my drinking actually got the worst was when I left and went into entrepreneurship. I believe that entrepreneurship is going to magnify anything that you already have within you that you're struggling with as far as mental health or things you're trying to cope with. So my two biggest triggers were loneliness and boredom. And so I left the busy restaurant world to go into being in my own office by myself with no boss, no structure, and bored out of my mind because I wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to be doing yet. And so that situation, you know, kind of spiraled things out of control. And that became the only thing I felt like I could cling to at that time that felt familiar and felt safe and felt comfortable.
I have so many questions about this topic specifically as to, can you maybe share more of like how you were able to work through that and maybe some of the things that you noticed showed up when you just had to kind of sit with the boredom and the loneliness, I guess you could say?
The last time that I drank was actually an event that I hosted because I had built another community centered around wine. I built a wine club, and I was there with friends, but since I was now an entrepreneur, it was also friends / colleagues / potential clients. And I blacked out that day. Don't remember how I got home. I very rarely blacked out, even though I drank a lot. And one of the parts of what like flipped the switch for me was like, this is my business now. You know, like my personal brand is going to actually dictate the success of my life. And it's not like the restaurant industry where you can just get drunk and show up the next day and everyone's like, yeah, did you see that dance you did? Like, you know, it's like, it's not celebrated. You know, there's a point when it's like, okay, like you falling down in the street is pretty unprofessional. I don't want you selling my house. Right? So I had this realization of like, I have to be more accountable to myself now in that area of my life, or else I'm never going to be successful in business because it's just affecting everything that I'm doing and how I show up.
I've never thought about entrepreneurship in that aspect of it held you to a higher standard.
Yes.
It forced you to a higher standard.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't, you wouldn't succeed.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that, but that's very true.
Self-accountability in all areas, but like drinking was the one where I had the least amount of self-accountability. And then it got so bad that I had no choice.
Did you just quit cold turkey after that moment?
I did.
Pretty simple for you? Do you have an addictive personality or no?
I do have an addictive personality. And this is what I tell people, because a lot of people say, I want to quit drinking or whatever. You have to get to the point where you're tired of your own shit. And I was at that point. I had done all of the negotiations of I'll just drink on the weekends, or I'll just drink on that, or I'll just have a glass of wine, you know, all of the just like the mind games that we play around rationalizing our behaviors. I just got to the point where I was like, this has to change, and it's not going to change any other way than for me to just like completely drop it and walk away and just fucking figure it out.
Do you think you will ever drink again?
Probably not.
And the reason I asked that question is because this is something I've been thinking about lately, is that it's always easier to say no than maybe, which I think is a cool part about you making that decision to essentially just not drink and be done with it, because that's way easier than like maybe on the weekends, or maybe on my birthday, or maybe with friends.
It's a trap.
Right. It's a trap because you force yourself to use willpower, which is fleeting.
Yes.
And so when your
willpower's a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when your willpower is low, you're going to make the wrong decision.
Right.
Versus just like having what I've often heard is called bright lines. Like there's certain things where it's like you just don't cross that line. Like, and maybe you could see it in your relationships of like, I just don't cheat, period. That's a bright line for me. Or I just don't drink, period. That's a bright line for me. Or I don't do drugs, whatever it is, right? Like people draw just like bright lines. However, though, I think there is an aspect of, I think about this all the time as well, is like the middle way. Right? I think there is some components, maybe not alcohol isn't a great example of this, but I think there are components in life of like, for me, like right now, food is a big one. I feel like, right? Is there was a time in my life where like I never had desserts and I just never had sugar and I never had certain foods, and it was like a bright line for me. But at some point that actually felt unhealthy. At some point it was like taking away from the general joys of life. Right. And the reason I bring this up is because I think it's topic dependent about like where we draw bright lines. And I'd also love to know for you, are there any other things in your life where you have those like hard lines in the sand, or is alcohol the only one?
I would say alcohol is probably the only one. And I'm at the point now where I just don't see why I would. I was actually thinking about this morning. There's two ways to think about your relationship with alcohol. I think one of the things that's really important is that people are educated about what alcohol actually does in their body. And so now that I'm very educated on it because I'm fascinated by it and I love to know what's happening in my body, it's like I know too much. So like for me to sit there and try to enjoy one glass of wine, like I would just be thinking about all the statistics that the research shows. Like I wouldn't be able to actually sit there and enjoy it. And I know my relationship with alcohol is addictive. And if I just had one, then I would be, well, why don't I just have two? And then I don't want to play that game. It's not a good use of my mental energy. And I don't want to play that game with myself.
Totally.
So I think it's different for different people, but I think a lot of people don't have the education about what it's doing in their bodies. So that's the first part. And then thinking about it like a relationship. And it's just like any other relationship you have in life. It can be toxic. It can be healthy. It can be in balance. It can fluctuate through different stages. But having the level of self-awareness and to be like honest with yourself instead of just like bullshitting yourself the whole way, like thinking it's okay.
Yeah, I can resonate with a lot of that, of knowing the things like where you should be putting the bright line in. And obviously this is a great example of it, of like knowing the educational piece of like what it's actually doing to your body just makes that decision a lot easier for you, right? Of like knowing that it's negatively affecting you in many ways. I've never shared this on a podcast show episode, but it's funny too that we're talking about this. Is I luckily don't really have that addictive of a personality, because like even in college, I used to like occasionally smoke a cigarette or like have a chew when you're drinking.
Yeah.
But the second I left the environment of college, I never even thought twice about it anymore.
Yeah.
Right. I never had like the physical, people talk about like you would get the sweats or whatever it is when they quit. I never had any of those experiences. It was actually very simple for me. And I think it was a change in environment. And where I'm going with this is, the reason I bring it up is like, I would argue maybe the restaurant business seems to cater a lot to that. I've never thought about it. I've never worked in it, right? But like getting out of that and deciding to get into a new community, and just like how profoundly that's improved your life essentially.
And I think that translates into the content creation conversation too, is when you do quit drinking or whatever else, you know, if you know you have an addictive personality, you can become addictive to social media or to creating content. I mean, some people are so busy creating content, they forget to like stop for a fucking second and like actually be in the moment and enjoy what they're doing. Like I went to the Oasis the other night, beautiful sunset, like something you'd see in a movie. And everyone was on their phone. Everyone was on their phone. And I just stood there and like looked around, because I'm by myself, and it's just all these, they're with their families too, and they're just on their phones. And, you know, I took my phone out and took like a 15-second thing and threw it on Instagram. But it's like, are we even here anymore? Like, it's this very surreal thing of like, hello, is anybody listening? Like, is anyone actually mentally here anymore? Or are we so sucked into this second reality that has consumed everything that we're doing? So I think the conversation about addiction translates a lot into social media.
Totally. Two things that I've realized about you that I appreciate a lot is, one of them is that you're very present of all the events that we've ran, even the one yesterday. Like, you're very good at not forcing, but like encouraging people to just pause and take a moment and to appreciate and to look around, because it's so easy to be at an event of any form and to get wrapped up into like everything that's happening and not actually taking a moment to pause and appreciate it. And the second thing I've noticed about you is that you're very thoughtful about people and like what they're thinking and feeling, and making sure to reach out and to like get input onto like, how are things going essentially. Have you always been that way, or where does that come from?
Nope.
Okay.
I think through my sobriety, honestly, I think I've become a much more empathetic person through my own necessity to humble myself. I also think that failing in real estate early on, that was the first time I really failed at anything. I've always been a high achiever, always won all the contests, all the awards. Even in my corporate job, even when I was unhappy, I was still performing really well. So going through my own like personal failures and then going through the experience of sobriety has humbled me a lot. And I used to be, I'm not going to use the C word, but I used to be a C word. I used to be not very enjoyable to be around because I was not humble. I was cocky. I thought I had everything figured out. You know, that success got to my head. You know, I had all of the money and all of the things, which now I've learned don't mean anything. But I wasn't happy. And then it just started this like rediscovery of like what really does make me happy. And going through that, like it's very humbling.
Have you noticed that now that you're obviously happy? Can we
most
agree?
of the time?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now that you feel like you just probably experience more happiness and joy, has that allowed you also to be more present and thoughtful of other people?
Yeah. Yeah, because it comes from the inside out.
Right.
And I love myself so much that like it's overflowing. And I know that sounds like super cliche, but I'm like obsessed with myself, and that allows me to go out and love on other people. Whereas before it was like I couldn't even get myself together, much less care about anybody else. So I feel like I'm really coming from a place where I can give. Whereas before it was like everything was just so draining on me that I couldn't even like stay afloat.
I love that you bring that up because I was literally the last conversation I had, Daniel Gertner. If anybody doesn't listen to it, go check it out. But we hit on this exact same idea of how most people would tell you that it's selfish to do a lot of selfish things like self-care, taking care of yourself, working out, having time for yourself, saying no to people. But exactly to your point, and this is what we got into, it's actually the most selfless thing you can do because like the more happy and joyful and things you can do that fill you up, it just overflows like a volcano into other people and other areas of your life.
You're equipping yourself to be able to serve.
Totally.
You're a vehicle for whatever you believe in. You're a vehicle. So like the better you take care of yourself, you can then go out and do what you were put here to do. And that was a part of my realization when I stopped drinking too. Like I remember being in bed, sick, 8:00 at night, and I'm like, here comes another 2-day hangover. And a lot of things going through my head, but one of the louder ones was, this is not what you're here for. Like you're not here to lay in bed and miss 2 days out of your life because you're so hungover, because that's what happens after 30. You can't drink like this anymore. But like that's not why you're here. And so none of us will ever realize our potentials unless we become like literally obsessed with taking care of ourselves and then see how that can ripple out into the people around us.
So what's the future of Lora Harris? So you're now in this stage of life where you've done the real estate thing, you've done the social media thing, you're helping other people with consulting in terms of social media. Now you're doing the sobriety thing. This is the latest thing, right? There's an event tonight.
Yes.
Is that the future, or what do you see ahead of you?
I am very fluid at this point. And that's something that I learned through the lessons we were talking about earlier, is I am okay with going where I feel aligned and not feeling like tied down to certain things. Hence the traveling a little bit, and I'm getting rid of all my stuff. I'm packing up the car and I'm going. I don't know where I'll be in 6 months. And the old me would have freaked the fuck out at that. But now I'm like, this is the most exciting thing I've ever done. You know? So I don't know where I'll be, but I do know the things that I'm passionate about. There will be something with sobriety. There will be things with mental health. There will be work where I'm serving other people in the consulting space, teaching them what I know and helping them to not only perform better in their business, but also like have that mental health aspect of it that we talked about. And yeah, just doing whatever I can do of service to others while also like respecting my time and my professional experience. And I think that that's a boundary that I'm always playing with.
And there will be dog videos.
Of course. She's not retiring. She's paid a little less now, but she's not retiring.
Do you feel, is this the first pet you've ever had?
This is the first pet I've had like from a baby and raised myself. So she's very special to me.
Do you feel like a more compassionate person since having a dog?
Oh, yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. Because it's not all about me anymore. And it's also the first animal I've had where I'm the only caretaker. So I've always had either, significant other or family or roommates or whatever. This is the first time when it's like everything that has to do with her is my responsibility. And that teaches you a lot.
The reason I bring that up is I don't have a pet. I love pets, but I don't have one. I watch everybody else's pets, as you've seen. And I think I might have mentioned this to you before, but I was watching my friends' pets, Ross and Savannah, love them to death. And they have 2 dogs, and I was staying at their house, and I got up to meditate one morning. And normally, like, you just want to be alone, you don't want to be bugged, but like dogs love to just fucking cuddle with you whenever you're meditating.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget.
They know.
Oh yeah. They know. They want to be involved, right? Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I knew they were gonna kind of crawl on me. And Summer, she gets up on me and like lays on my side, and then Odin like puts his head like right on my lap. And the first thought that came in my head was annoyance, right? Like I was annoyed that these dogs were interrupting my meditation session. And then the second thought that came into my head was, that's fucking dumb. Like, why are you annoyed?
I'm familiar with that thought.
Like, why are you annoyed that these dogs want to share love to you?
Yeah.
Like, that's all they want to do.
I know.
They just want to show you love, and I'm rejecting it, and I'm fighting it. And I swear to God, it was like a breakthrough moment for me. And I still think about this all the time now, of like any time, especially dogs, but even now humans, of like when they're just trying to show me love and I'm for whatever reason rejecting it and pushing it away. That's a reflection of me, not them.
Yes.
Right. And so I've seen that just show up in my own life. And that's why I was curious as to like what you've maybe got out of having a dog and the compassion that's come from it.
Dogs will teach you a lot. And one of the things I've heard about dogs, which this is like really trippy to think about, is that when you're with a dog, it's like you're alone, but you're not. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, where you have to share that space and energy with someone, and all they want from you is love.
That's it.
And attention.
Yeah.
But you're still kind of alone with your own thoughts because they can't speak to you, right? So it's this very interesting like halfway place between being by yourself and being in company with other people is being with a dog, because they're so in tune to you. Mm-hmm. And so we do the same thing. Callie, she'll come get on the yoga mat with me, and she'll come snuggle with me. And she wasn't always that way, but now she's calming down a little bit. But she knows if I'm crying, she'll come up and lick the tears off my face. And I catch myself doing that too, of like being annoyed a lot of, I have to come let you home, and I have to come feed you, and I have to come whatever. But what I keep reminding myself of, and Gary Vee talks about this, is like, just remember that it could be a lot worse. I mean, she could get hit by a car tomorrow. And he talks about that. Like, we get so far away from like being grateful for the things we have until they're gone. And so I just always remind myself with her, and we should say this with everybody and everything, like, this will be gone one day. Every person, every situation, every feeling, good or bad, this is temporary, and it won't be here anymore one day. So what do I choose to do with it while it's right here, right in front of me?
Sam Harris talks about that. Way easier said than done, obviously, in practice, but he talks a lot about how, what if you lived every moment as if this was your last? Because it could be. Mm-hmm. We have no idea. This could be the last time ever that I do a podcast episode, or that we sit down and have a conversation together, or whoever's listening to the show gets to listen to an episode. Like, it could be the last time. We have no idea. But what if we just decided to live every moment like that?
Yeah.
Again, way easier said than done, obviously. But so I have a round of rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
First thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Yep. Are you ready? What's
your best business advice?
Stop trying to be like everyone else.
What's your best marketing advice?
Stop trying to be like everyone else.
What's your favorite part about entrepreneurship?
Freedom.
When are you the most productive?
6 a.m.
So you're a morning bird?
Mm-hmm.
Ditto. Who is your inspiration?
My mom.
Wow, that's cool. Why?
Because she's been married to my dad forever, and my dad has Parkinson's, and she is a fucking superhero for taking care of him. Unconditional love is what I get to see in action.
That's cool. Mm-hmm. Tell me one secret about you, or something most people don't know about you.
I play the piano.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow. You've never have you ever posted about that?
No. Well, maybe once in my stories. I never get my hands on a piano, so it's kind of hard. Yeah.
I play the guitar. Fun fact.
We're starting a band.
Let's do it. What would you change about yourself, if anything?
Nothing.
What's your favorite app or resource right now?
Repurpose.io.
That's a social media deal?
It is. It helps redistribute your content onto different platforms. A little difficult to get set up, but once you get it set up, it's all automated.
Huh. I'll have to check it out. When were you the happiest?
I have two. When I first got my dog, and she was a puppy, because it feels like having a child. The second one is when I get messages about sobriety, about people that have hit milestones or decided to get sober because of or inspired by me. That's when I know I'm doing something right.
Do you have any stories in relation to sobriety from whether you or others that you've talked to that have been really encouraging for you?
I do get a lot of DMs of people like, hey, I just hit my 1 year, 2 year, whatever. And like, I've never heard from these people before. Sometimes I don't know them at all. And it's crazy. And it's just always a good reminder of continuing to share our message. All of those things that came up when I stopped drinking, all those voices and those thoughts, the other loudest one was share your story more. Like, you need to talk about this and you need to share your story more. And that message always comes up when I'm manifesting or holding space or, asking for what is the next step. It's share your story more.
I know you and I post about this all the time about just when we get those messages, and that is so much more fuel than I feel like anything else that I do, is when you get those messages where people have like actually getting value out of some of the things you've created or talked about. And it's funny too, because it's always so random and I'm always so blind to it of the things that resonate with people. Like even this episode, for example, or other episodes that I've had, I'd get off of it and I was like, yeah, that was good. That was fine. Yeah. And then for whatever reason, somebody, I have no idea why, but it just like changed their life, totally resonated with them. And it was like, so you have no idea. You never have any idea. It's
That's crazy. Why you have to show up and create.
Totally.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part about Austin?
The sunsets.
That's fitting for Oasis. I have one last question. Before I ask that question, though, I just want to acknowledge you for being a lifelong Austin friend from day one and sliding into my DMs and continuing to stay consistent and reaching out and checking in on me and supporting all the events that we do and posting great content and helping a lot of people and building community. And even last night, helping out with Bill and his 200 plus wristbands that he had to hand out to people. And I just want to acknowledge you're just helping out a lot of people.
Thank you.
Of course. Before I ask my last question, what's your plug? Where can people find you?
They can find me on all the channels, the Lora Harris. And yeah, I do consulting stuff just on a referral basis now. So if any of that speaks to someone, they can just reach out to me. I don't market that too much. And then also in the mental wellness space, if that's a passion, we didn't dive too much into that today, but I'm always open to conversations.
Cool.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the show notes. Last question. It's really, what's your best advice or your best business advice? So if you were to start over from ground zero, you were just getting out of the restaurant business, maybe you didn't want to go the real estate route, but you do want to start a business of some form. What's maybe the best piece of advice you could give to this person that would maybe just like, don't buy business cards, I think would be step number one. But like, what would you focus on? What would be the things to be thinking about?
My best advice I could give is fail faster. Fail faster, take the lesson, take the feedback, get the fuck up, do it again. Yeah. Failure is the only way to success. So the faster you can get there is through your failures.
Do you know Darren Hardy? Mm-mm. So he first made his wealth mostly in the real estate industry. And that's why I was wondering if you knew who he is. But he has Darren Daly's his thing. He's written a number of books. He's, in terms of like mentors that I've never met, I would say probably one of the most influential people I've ever followed in my life. The reason I bring this up is your point to failure is he talks about success as a pendulum. And he says on one side of the pendulum you have success and on the other side of the pendulum you have failure. But the interesting thing about this pendulum is that the only side you can control is the side of failure. And he was saying when he first got into, I don't think it was actually real estate. I think he was selling these like water filters. And so basically his mentor was like, yeah, go out and fail, like knock on a bunch of doors, call people at horrible times, like basically do all the painful things that nobody wanted to do. And he's like, how can I just like really get uncomfortable and just fail at a lot of stuff? And as you would expect, as the story goes, essentially like it swung the opposite direction into just like a lot more wealth and a lot more success and a lot more happiness in his life. And so I always think about that just analogy of the pendulum of like, fail hard and fast. I almost find myself now, I don't know if you do as well, of getting uncomfortable when I'm not failing at things.
You're not trying enough.
Totally.
You should always be failing.
Totally. As crazy as that sounds.
Terrible advice.
But
it's legit.
Yeah. But
it's legit. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for being on the show. Appreciate you.
Hey friend, thanks for listening to the show. And if you have any feedback for me about the show or any other guests that you'd want to see in the show, definitely shoot me a message. I love engaging with my audience and figuring out how I can provide the best value possible to the people listening to this show. Before you go, I only have one ask of you, and that would be to check out my 3 Tips Tuesday newsletter. It's 3 marketing tips every Tuesday specifically for the health and fitness entrepreneur to help them attract new leads. If you press the link in the description, it'll take you directly to the archive of all my previous newsletters, and you can decide for yourself if it's something for you. If you end up finding it helpful, you can just sign up for the newsletter and you'll get it in your inbox every Tuesday. Thanks again, and keep hustling, my friends.